In this video, we're going to look at UFC 288. We're going to go over the entire card. I'll give you my predictions for every fight, and we'll go over things from a betting perspective. As always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. Last week, the dogs were barking, and this is cool that we're seeing the dogs bark. It adds some parity. I don't like when the favorites dominate, although it did sink us from a DraftKings perspective, at least me personally. We got egged. Stephanie Egger egged us. It happens. With our betting, however, we swept the card. Every week, I put official bets on the Kunith MMA website. We had 4 on the article last week. We had over 2.5 rounds in the Horth fight, under a round and a half with the Alex Siva fight. We went heavy on Martin Budai's money line, and we had Rodolfo Vieira, Cody Brundage under. Thank you for jumping, Gilly. Cody, we appreciate it. So for those official bets, you can visit kunithmma.com. That'll be linked in the description and in a pinned comment. And we want to keep that momentum rolling into this week. Let's go. In our main event, we have the return of Triple C, the return of the King of Cringe, the return of... He's challenging Aljamain Sterling for the bantamweight title, and Aljamain Sterling's run as champion has been controversial to say the least. He started it off by winning the belt in a fight against Petr Yan, where he was getting dominated and really beaten in every area of MMA, but an illegal knee from Petr Yan late in that fight disqualified Yan, resulting in a championship for Aljo. They had a rematch over a year later, where most fans thought that Petr Yan won the fight. He did clearly dominate the last 2 rounds, but it was really the first round where it was a toss-up, because Aljamain did great work in rounds 2 and 3. And he did great work when he was able to get Petr Yan to the ground, specifically when he was able to get his back. The human backpack Aljamain Sterling is a problem on the mat. Evidence of that is when he took out Corey Sandhagen, who's one of the best bantamweights in the world right now, and he did it with ease. He took him down early, took him down again, and then was able to get the back and choke him out. So when Aljamain Sterling can get the fight to his world, and when he can get into his position, he's beating anybody. But after he defends his title successfully against Petr Yan, he fights TJ Dillashaw, who came in the fight with one arm, and he fought that way. He was clearly injured, clearly compromised, and now we look at Aljamain Sterling's run as a champion. It's a disqualification, a potentially bad decision, and a fight against an injured opponent. Now on the other side, you have Henry Cejudo, the greatest combat sports athlete of all time. His words, not mine, although you could make the case. Now he's coming off a 3-year-long retirement, and for those of you that are new, or for those of you that forgot, this guy left the game on top. If you look at Cejudo's last 5 opponents, Sergio Pettis, who won the Bellator bantamweight title in his last fight, Demetrius Johnson, one of the best fighters ever, and he's still winning belts in ONE FC. Prime TJ Dillashaw, who was on steroids. Who was on crack? Prime Magic Marlon Moraes, and Dominic Cruz, who was largely considered the greatest bantamweight of all time. The run he was on was phenomenal, and it looked like his skills were getting better every time he competed, and I do think that he has more ways to win this fight. When they're striking, although Aljamain is longer and rangier, I do think that Henry Cejudo is going to have better hands, harder, faster low kicks, and a better chin. I see him winning the striking exchanges and forcing Sterling into these striking exchanges because the Olympic gold medalist wrestler Henry Cejudo is rocking a 93% takedown defense, which should hold up against Aljamain Sterling, who has incredible jiu-jitsu but weak offensive takedowns. Evidence of that is when he went 2 for 22 against Petr Yan. I expect Henry Cejudo to touch Sterling up in this fight, and I think he can actually look dominant. The long layoff is keeping the line in check. He's the challenger here, but if you see value on Henry Cejudo, I'd hammer it. And I say that because if he looks anything like he did before his retirement, he's going to look like a -300 favorite in there, and he probably finishes Aljo late. So the pick for me in this fight is Henry Cejudo by knockout. And in our co-main event, we're looking at a fight with Gilbert Burns and Belal Muhammad. I love that the UFC made this fight, and I love that it's 5 rounds, because you have all this talk at welterweight about who should fight for the title next and who deserves what. As a fan, I hate it. This is how we should figure out who fights for the title. The best guys fight the best guys and make it 5 rounds. Now for Gilbert Burns, he's coming off a decision win over Street Judas, where he outboxed Masvidal, which was surprising, and he also out-wrestled him, and he didn't really look like he was in danger at any point in that fight. Gilbert Burns has serious jiu-jitsu, probably the best in the division, very heavy hands, solid cardio, and most importantly, he's got hunger. Me so hungry. He's old for welterweight at 36 years old, but he looks like he's peaking skill-wise and physically. And for those reasons, I do think that the window for gold for him is now. I think that he knows that, and that's why he's staying active, and he's fighting anyone. No one wants to fight Chimaev, and he said, I'll do it. No one even wants to fight the guy he's fighting now, but he's doing it. On the other side, Belal Muhammad has done a lot of the same. He's on a 9-fight unbeaten streak. His last 4 wins are massive over Damian Maia, Wonderboy, Vicente Luque, Luque over 5 rounds, and that fight against Sean Brady last time out was more one-sided than an episode of Bully Beatdown. Let me know in the comments if you ever used to watch Bully Beatdown. Great television. You gotta love the gas tank from Belal Muhammad, as well as the physical strength and the wrestling, of course, but he showed us in his last 2 fights that the striking is really coming along, and that's something that you like to see for a guy who's already got a very solid skill set. Now he spends some time training with Khabib's team that's just pumping out champions, and I still think the best version of Bully B is still to come. Now, just as a disclaimer, I need to let you know, I have bet against Gilbert Burns unsuccessfully multiple times. So this is a tough fight to predict, and that's why the line is so close. I do think that Gilbert Burns has more ways to win this fight, because there's no way that he loses this fight by submission, nor do I think he's going to get controlled on the ground for long periods of time. And I also have to give Gilbert Burns the edge in punching power, and we've seen Belal Muhammad rocked and knocked out before. The biggest difference maker for me in this fight, however, is going to come down to the cardio. And in the cardio department, I give Belal Muhammad the slight edge. It's not because Gilbert Burns has bad cardio, we know this. But Belal Muhammad is a grinder who's not going to give up, and Gilbert Burns, he's being active, but that could be a double-edged sword. At 36 years old, he fought less than a month ago. Your body peaks, you have to make weight. That's a lot of stress on the body, and he's going to do it all over again, and now he's got to fight 5 rounds against a guy who's going to push a pace. It's not like Jorge Masvidal who's accepting the back foot and saying, I'm retiring after this win, lose, or draw. This is Belal Muhammad who's going to put volume in his face. He's going to try to take him down, and I think in the 4th and 5th round, we do see that Gilbert Burns is going to slow down a little bit while Belal Muhammad is going to continue to push a pace, maybe even get stronger. So I like Belal Muhammad to stay competitive in the first 3 rounds, maybe steal one of those rounds, but pull away after the 3rd. So the pick for me is Belal Muhammad by decision. Next, we're looking at free money on Jessica Andrade. Absolute free smoke. Jessica Andrade wins this fight. Like we always talk about with Jessica Andrade, she may have had the toughest strength of schedule in all of women's MMA history. She's faced off against several world champions, all-time greats. She's won a championship of her own, and she's fighting the strongest of contenders on their way up, most recently Erin Blanchfield. And for Andrade, you gotta love the output, you gotta love the power, the physical strength, and the experience, and I think all of that's gonna be too much for Yan Xiaonan this week, who's taking a big step up in competition. Last time out, Yan survived some bad positions against Mackenzie Dern, squeaked out a decision win. That's cool. Before that, she lost to Marina Rodriguez, and we give her a pass because losing to Marina Rodriguez does happen to a lot of people. But before that, she was smashed, absolutely smashed by Carla Esparza, and I see Andrade having similar success if she does choose to grapple. And if she doesn't choose to grapple, I think Andrade still beats her up. I really do think that she's going to be better everywhere this fight goes, and I think she's going to win rounds and win a decision. And what gives me the most confidence here is knowing that Jessica Andrade is going to land at some point, and when she does, these will be the heaviest strikes Yan Xiaonan has ever felt during competition. What you like out of Yan Xiaonan is that she's typically throwing a lot of volume and she's fighting hard, but I do think that once Andrade starts touching her up a little bit, we're going to see her get hesitant, not throw as much. The consequences are too great. Give me the power, give me the experience, give me the more athletic fighter here, give me Jessica Andrade to win this fight by decision. Next, we're looking at a fight with Movsar Evloev, who's stepping in on short notice for Jonathan Pierce to fight Thug Nasty Bryce Mitchell. And Bryce Mitchell is looking to get back to his winning ways after suffering his first UFC setback last time out, where Ilia Topuria beat him like he stole something. But outside of that fight, he's been a force in the UFC, wrestling everyone to death, dropping Edson Barboza with a straight left, which is a huge feather in the cap, and strong-arming the UFC to give him some camo shorts.
Y'all gonna have to kill me or make me some camo shorts.
On the other side, you have Russian grappler Movsar Evloev, who's been dominating largely his UFC fights. He's undefeated, and he's climbing the featherweight rankings. In his last 2 fights, he landed 9 takedowns in each of those fights against Dan Ige and Min Hakim. Dan Ige had no answers for the wrestling, and neither did Min Hakim until that 3rd round, where he had Movsar Evloev all over the place. He was beating Movsar Evloev up in that 3rd round, and I think he just figured it out a little bit too late. That's honestly a fight that I would want to see again, because I do think that Min Hakim would be able to figure some things out and make the first 2 rounds more competitive. Now, as you can see on the screen, Bryce Mitchell is around plus 210 right now, and I do think that this is a little bit too wide, and I think this is a good buy low spot for Bryce Mitchell. We talked a little bit about this a couple of weeks ago with Bruno Silva, where the last performance left a bad taste in everybody's mouth. Recency bias is a hell of a drug, and as a result, we got a good line on Bruno Silva, who was a very live underdog, and I feel similarly about Bryce Mitchell this week. Evloev is a great grappler, again, but he isn't really fighting guys who are looking to grapple with him, nor is he he fighting guys who are threatening a whole lot of submission. And when he last fought a grappler like Mike Grundy, he got taken down 6 times to 0, and then Nick Lentz even had success grappling against him in their fight. If Mike Grundy is having success grappling with you and Nick Lentz is having success grappling with you, I have a lot of confidence that Bryce Mitchell is going to keep this competitive in the grappling exchanges during these scrambles. This fight will be decided by who is going to be able to spend more time in top position on the mat. I don't think they're going to strike for all that long, and if they do strike, I do give the slight edge to Bryce Mitchell. And for Bryce Mitchell to win this fight, he's going to have to be the aggressor. He's going to have to get Movsar Evloev to start playing defense rather than offense, and I do think that he can do that. I like Bryce Mitchell to be first here when it comes to the grappling, and if not, I like him to be active enough in bottom position to maybe pull off a reversal or threaten enough submissions to survive on the ground. So give me a good buy low spot, juicy odds on a guy who can grapple with anyone at 145 pounds. This isn't hard-hitting Ilia Topuria, this is control merchant Movsar Evloev. So give me Thug Nasty to win this fight by decision. Next, we're looking at Kron Gracie fighting Charles Jourdain. We haven't seen Kron Gracie compete since 2019. And for those of you that don't know, if you just watched the last card, this will be a good comp for you. Kron Gracie is essentially featherweight Rodolfo Vieira. Decorated jiu-jitsu player that came into the UFC, obviously comes from the historic Gracie family, and all of his wins have come by way of submission. If he wins this fight, it's going to be by way of submission, and it's most likely in the first round. Charles Jourdain is rocking a 48% takedown defense. He's been taken down 21 times in 10 UFC fights. I've seen power forwards on JV basketball teams keep their feet better than Charles Jourdain. But like the comparison that we made with Rodolfo Vieira, this fight could end up being a lot like the Vieira fight from last week. And I say that because if Charles Jourdain is able to keep the feet, I think that he knocks Kron Gracie out here. He's got power, he's got volume, he gets stronger as the fight goes along, and I think he absolutely lights Gracie up on the feet if they spend too much time there. I think even if they get beyond the first round, that means that he did enough surviving on the ground or at least in the clinch to be able to extend him, which should lend itself to a late knockout finish sometime in the second or third round for Charles Jourdain. I think it makes sense to keep your computer open or keep your phone next to you while this fight is going on, because Charles Jourdain, you might want to live bet him after the first round. But that's only if he gets it to that place, because again, Kron Gracie is probably going to find a submission in the first round, and you also have to think with this long layoff, he's probably putting an emphasis on his offensive wrestling. He's grappled for so long, and it's so ingrained in his culture and in his blood that he's not going to forget how to make guys tap out. Like that's just part of what he does. His jiu-jitsu is maxed out. His jiu-jitsu stats are all the way up. So it would have made sense for him to take this time to focus on that offensive wrestling so that he can get guys into his world, because once he's down there, he's not going to see a lot of guys that can compete with him at 145 pounds. So really a striker versus grappler matchup here. I do like the grappler here to win by submission. Again, if you want to live bet Charles Jourdain after the first round when he probably becomes the underdog, that makes sense. But for me, the pick in this fight, the prediction for this fight is Kron Gracie by submission. Before we get into this next fight, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, comment something for the algorithm. You know how the algorithm works. Now for this next fight, I've thought long and hard about this. I have. I'm going to give you my prediction before we talk about the fight, because I'm going to need you to stick with me here. In this next fight, I think that Matt Frevola knocks out Drew Dober.
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
Now, comments are always welcome, but before you rush to the comments to tell me that Drew Dober has the best chin in the UFC, and how he's only been knocked out once in 37 professional fights, or how he's only been knocked down once in his UFC career, and how he's over a 2-to-1 favorite in this spot, just listen to what I have to say. I've heard that same shtick, I've heard that same rhetoric in the past when people told me that Jeff Neal wasn't going to be able to knock out Vicente Luque, and then he kills him. Or when Jeremiah Wells wasn't going to knock out Court McGee, dead. So I get it. When you pick against an iron chin and you say that they're going to get finished, it's an unpopular opinion, and a lot of people feel very strongly about it, but anything can happen in MMA. Kanye West let us know that diamonds are forever, and I'm here to let you know that chins are not. The reason we love Drew Dober as fans is because of his elite durability, but the only reason we know he has elite durability is because it gets tested all the time. Even last time out, he was getting lumped up by Bobby Green. We saw him eat a huge shot against Rafael Alves. Terrence McKinney was playing pinball with his chin, and in that Terrence McKinney fight, had Chris Tognoni been the ref that night, that would have been called a KO loss for Drew Dober, let's be real. And Matt Frevola is throwing bricks, and he's throwing everything into these punches, and he's becoming more and more accurate with his punches and his hooks. They've been landing very heavy. If Drew Dober hangs around in the pocket too long like he's one to do, Matt Frevola is going to bomb on him. And the same could be said for the other side. Absolutely. Drew Dober has serious power, great forward pressure, and we've seen Matt Frevola rocked, dropped, and knocked out before. I think the winner of this fight gets it done by knockout either way, but I like the plus money on Matt Frevola. The best bet, in my opinion, for this fight is that it doesn't go the distance, but if it does go the distance, that's even more reason to lean on Matt Frevola, because he's got the wrestling advantage in this fight. But for as crazy as it might sound, I do do think that Matt Frevola wins this fight by knockout. Just based on what you've seen from him lately, based on Drew Dober always eating big shots, I do think that one day it's going to run out, and this could be one of those days. You can't go to the well too many times, and you can't lean on that durability. You know, we've seen legendary brawlers get chin checked out of nowhere, and that could happen this week, especially with a guy like Matt Frevola. So again, give me the steamroller to win this fight by knockout. Now we have Kennedy and Nzechukwu. He's fighting Devin Clark this week, and Nzechukwu is a decent favorite here, and the line makes sense for several reasons. He's 5 inches taller, he's going to have an 8-inch reach advantage, he's younger, he hits a lot harder, and he's finishing these fights. Kennedy's actually had a really impressive UFC run. Although he's 5-1, one of those losses was to Paul Craig with a last-minute submission in a fight that he was absolutely winning, and another loss was a recent split decision loss over Nick Negamarianu, which was an absolute robbery. But he's got all the talent and physical attributes that you'd want to see from a light heavyweight fighter, and he's far better than Devin Clark. Clark is 8-7 in the UFC with only 1 finish in those 8 wins, while he's been finished in 6 of his 7 UFC losses. He's a wrestler who likes to hold guys up against the fence while he's looking for his takedowns, but he's only converting takedowns at 34%, while Nzechukwu is defending them at 80%. I do expect this fight to be fought in the clinch for a while on Clark's terms, but when they're at range, I think that Kennedy and Nzechukwu is going to land the heavier punches, he's going to land the better punches, and he's going to be able to maintain his distance and find that knockout finish. And what you got to love from Nzechukwu is that he's finishing these fights late, like a second round finish, late round finish. That's what he does because he can pour it on when he gets guys hurt. You love to see that in these heavier divisions where guys tend to slow down, which is always a big plus. So give me Kennedy to win this fight. I do think he wins by knockout. Next we have Khaos Williams welcoming Rolando Bedoya to the UFC. This is crazy matchmaking for a guy making his UFC debut. Khaos Williams lands with as much power as anybody we see in the division, and I do think that he probably flatlines this kid at some point. At 26 years old, to make your UFC debut against a guy who's got one-shot knockout power, good defense, and somebody who's patient enough to wait for that shot to come, there's just a lot of things going against Bedoya in this spot. He's only 26 years old. He's making his UFC debut. He hasn't fought in a while, and this is a different situation than Fernando Padilla last week. We picked Padilla, and one of the reasons why we felt good about it was because of the long layoff. A young guy has a longer layoff, and he's not fighting. He's getting better, and he's getting better at a rapid rate because he's young. But he's fighting a guy in Julian Erosa who he stunned with basically the first shot that he landed. That's possible against Julian Erosa, who's been chin-checked before. Khaos Williams has good defense. On top of that, Bedoya is a brawler who's going to be coming forward, a lot of nervous energy. He's going to look to take Khaos Williams' head off, and Khaos Williams' head ain't going nowhere. I'll tell you that right now. I think we're going to see an aggressive approach from the Bedoya corner, and it's just not going to work out well for him. I do think that Khaos Williams packs him up and probably knocks him out in the first or second round. Williams is going to be the bigger man. He's going to be the longer man. He's going to hit harder. He's got higher level experience, and I do think that making your UFC debut in front of a live crowd against a guy like this is just a recipe for disaster. Williams is the biggest favorite on the card. The line is justified. The best bet here is taking the under, but the pick for me in this fight is going to be Khaos Williams by knockout. Next, we're looking at friend of the show, Marina Rodriguez, the uncrowned strawweight queen. She's throwing down this week against fellow Brazilian Virna Jandiroba. For Marina Rodriguez, she does a really good job of fighting long, extending combinations, mixing in power shots with those lighter peppering shots. She does a good job of setting up her big punches. And we've seen her put up some serious significant strike totals in the UFC, like 118 against Jessica Aguilar, 125 against Michelle Waterson, 144 against Mackenzie Dern. And on the other side, Virna Jandiroba has leaned on her grappling to have success in the UFC. She out-grappled Angela Hill last time. She picked up back-to-back submission wins against Felice Herrig and Mallory Martin earlier in her UFC career. But in this fight, I think that Jandiroba is just a little too hittable, and I don't think she's going to have the volume to keep up with Marina Rodriguez, who's going to stuff takedown attempts and let her hands go non-stop.
Non-stop? An action thriller wherein a U.S. Marshal has to solve a murder mystery and clear his own name, all whilst flying on an airplane 40,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean. What about non-stop, though?
Jandiroba has a negative striking differential, and she's never landed north of 63 significant strikes in a fight. Marina Rodriguez lands 63 strikes before she gets out of bed in the morning. So give me the output, the length, the distance management from Marina Rodriguez. Add another one to the list. The pick for me is Marina Rodriguez by decision. Our next fight, we have Parker Porter as a favorite in the UFC. Let's just take that in for a second. He's fighting Braxton Smith, who looks like Carl Winslow if he lived next to a Gold's Gym, and I do think that Braxton Smith, as an underdog here, there's a ton of value for several reasons. He's younger, he's the better athlete, I think he's physically stronger than Parker Porter, and he hits way harder. He's flatlining guys if you go back and watch some of his fights. Parker Porter, on the other side, is winning fights with volume, control, and he's got a good skill set, but he's definitely a generalist. Not only that, but when he's losing, he's getting finished. and I do think that he can get finished here. Last time out, we saw him run headfirst onto a counter left from Justin Tafa, and that just gives me no confidence in this man. At 13-8 with his build, he should be fighting Jake Collier next. If he loses this fight, him versus Jake Collier is the perfect fight for the UFC to make. Loser leaves town. I could see him having success in this fight if he is patient, if he takes his time, if he extends Braxton Smith, but at the same time, we saw last time out against Justin Tafa, he just got a little antsy. Instead of fighting behind his jab, minding his P's and Q's, letting the fight come to him, he tried to bring the fight to his opponent. I don't think that he has the skill set or the power or the chin necessarily to be able to do those things. I think guys in the heavyweight division that have big power and have better speed are going to be able to catch his chin, knock him out, and I think that's what Braxton Miller does this week. So give me Carl Winslow by knockout. Next, we're looking at a fight with Phil Hawes, who's coming in at nearly a 2-1 underdog. Juicy.
Boy, that big got some juice to it, don't it? Yeah.
He's fighting Ikram Aliskerov this week, who's coming off a win on Dana White's Contender Series. Aliskerov is solid. He's right in his fighting prime at 30 years old. Good size for the weight class as well at 6 foot with a 76-inch reach. And you see his record there at 13-1. That one is Khamzat Chimaev. We give you a pass, kid. But I do think that this is a bad matchup, not only because he's making his debut, but because Phil Hawes is probably going to neutralize the best part of his game, which is his wrestling. We've never seen Phil Hawes taken down in the UFC. We have seen him out-grappled most recently by Roman Dolidze, who popped his knee out of place and then just flatlined him on the feet. And I do worry about Phil Hawes' chin when they are striking, but I do think that Phil Hawes, talent-wise and athleticism-wise, is much better than Aliskerov, and I do think that he's going to be able to touch him up if they are fighting at range. Aliskerov is probably going to look to close distance, clinch, and look for those takedowns, but if he can't get Phil Hawes down, I think that he might get knocked out in this spot because Phil Hawes does have that power that he can knock out anybody at 185 pounds. But Phil Hawes does tend to get into brawls. He does tend to get wobbled when he's hit cleanly. Like even against Deron Winn, he was smoking Deron Winn. But you can't ignore the fact that there were moments in that fight where Deron Winn would throw an overhand left, it'd catch Phil Hawes, and you'd see him stumble a little bit. You think that if Deron Winn was a little bit more active, had a little bit more pop in his shots, he probably could have put him down. So it's a tough fight because I do want to back the new prospect, the new shiny toy, and I think that he has the skills to win fights in the UFC, but Phil Hawes in your UFC debut when you're a grappler is going to be a tough task. I like Phil Hawes to throw the straighter shots, to land the heavier shots, to be more active when the fight is at range, and to stuff the takedowns. I do think that Phil Hawes wins this fight. Give me Phil Hawes by knockout. And I say by knockout because I don't know if Phil Hawes is going to be able to win a decision here if it does go the full 15 minutes. I think the longer this fight goes, the more it favors Ikram because he's going to have the opportunity to get the fight to the ground. And I do think that if he does get the fight to the ground, he's very live for a submission or at least just being able to control Phil Hawes. But I do think that Phil Hawes catches him on the feet at some point in the first or second round. So again, give me Phil Hawes to win this fight as an underdog by knockout. Next, we're looking at a fight with Rafael Estevam, who is stepping in on short notice against Zhalgas Zhumagulov, who cannot buy a decision in the UFC. Zhalgas Zhumagulov is constantly having close fights where he looks like he's doing enough and he doesn't get the rub from the judges. You see the fight against Charles Johnson where I thought that he won and he didn't, or the fight against Jeff Molina where I thought that he won but he didn't. But he's also not bringing to the table a fighting style that is definitively winning rounds, and I think that's the biggest issue that he's having. He throws heavy punches but not the heaviest punches, and he's grappling but he's not a dominant grappler. So you're looking at a situation where the skill set is just a little bit limited for Zhalgas Zhumagulov, who is better than his record would suggest, but I don't know if he's doing a whole lot to win these fights. Now on the other side, you have Rafael Estevam, who if they are going the full 15 minutes, probably wins this fight just because of the optic. He's going to be the bigger man. He's going to be the more active fighter. He's going to throw a lot more punches, and he's probably going to get the fight to the ground on his terms, or at least to make it look that way if the fight ever goes to the ground, showing off that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's undefeated. He's younger. He's someone with a win off of the Contender Series. So if anybody's going to get the rub from the judges in this fight, it's going to be Estevam. But I don't know if this fight goes the distance. We've seen Zhalgas Zhumagulov eat some big punches, like against Manel Kape, and Manel Kape bombed on him. We saw even Charles Johnson was really touching him up in the third round. And the way that Charles Johnson fought in the third round, you would have thought that Charles Johnson could have knocked him out if he was doing that earlier. I think the aggression alone from Estevam is going to win him this fight, and I think that he's going to find one of those big hooks that he likes to throw right behind the ear, right on the chin. And I think that he puts Zhalgas Zhumagulov down. I think that he finishes him in this fight. It is a tough ask to beat Zhalgas Zhumagulov in your UFC debut, but I think Estevam has all the tools to do it. And I do think that Zhalgas Zhumagulov teasing retirement after the most recent loss. It's not a good look. These guys are at 2 different points in their career. Rafael Estevam just really getting started, not even in his fighting prime yet. Zhalgas Zhumagulov, been there, done that, fought in the UFC for a while. I do think he's on his way out. So give me Rafael Estevam to win this fight inside the distance. Next, we have a fight with Claudio Ribeiro and Joseph Holmes. Joseph Holmes, you can't bet on him. The reason I say that is because he's obviously still very green. The skill set is limited, especially on the feet, and he lost to Jamie Pickett. Losing to Jamie Pickett, to me, is a huge blemish when it comes to guys who are UFC caliber, who are winning fights in the UFC. I don't think that Ugly Man Joe wins this fight. Claudio Ribeiro, last time out, he loses a fight by knockout to Abdul Razak Al Hassan, and that was a fight where it could have went either way. He was either going to knock Al Hassan out or he was going to get knocked out. We knew that. I picked Ribeiro in that fight because of his heavy leg kicks, the awkward angles, the hooks that he throws, and we saw him on Contender Series land those big hooks and get that knockout finish to get into the UFC. But it was the striking defense from Al Hassan, UFC veteran, who was able to see everything well defensively, find the right shot, and win this fight. I don't think that Ugly Man Joe has that in his locker at all. And Joseph Holmes is one of these guys who's bigger than most of the guys that he's fought, so I could see some tall guy defense coming in there, not like Trey Waters' tall guy defense, because that was awesome. That was a masterclass. But more so Dan Hooker versus Michael Chandler tall guy defense, just leaning back, running away, and I do think that Claudio Ribeiro is going to catch him. I think he's going to be the guy moving forward, and I think he's going to stuff the takedown attempts coming from Joseph Holmes. I don't see Joseph Holmes reacting all that well to the shots of Claudio Ribeiro, and I do think that Ribeiro goes on to win this fight by knockout, and it's probably early. I'm going to say first round knockout for the Brazilian here. And then the last fight that we'll look at, the first fight of the night, and if you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment for the algorithm. We have Willie Cat Daniel Santos fighting Johnny Munoz Jr. I do like Willie Cat at -165. Last time out, he looked like Dubronx Jr. over John Castaneda, and I do think that he's going to have the striking advantage in this fight against Johnny Munoz, who's very talented and does good work with the grappling, but he can get touched up on the feet. The spinning attacks, the diversity of attack, I like all of that from Daniel Santos, and I have to say, Daniel Santos, I was really low on him against John Castaneda because his UFC debut was all-time bad. If you go back and watch his UFC debut, it is crazy how bad it was. You would almost have wanted him to get knocked out early in that fight rather than what you saw. At Johnny Munoz, we picked him last time out to beat Ludovic Shalinian, and he looked good in that fight, but against Tony Gravely before that, he shot for a takedown, got caught with a very short shot from Tony Gravely. It was an uppercut on his way in, and it knocked him dead. So I worry a little bit about the striking from Johnny Munoz, and I worry about the chin from Johnny Munoz, especially against the guy in Daniel Santos who's going to put a lot out there, and he's going to throw a lot of diverse technique your way. Even on the mat, I think that Daniel Santos will threaten submissions, work well back up to his feet, and continue to win these striking exchanges against Johnny Munoz. But I don't think that he knocks him out here. I do think that Johnny Munoz is going to be able to survive the whole 15. But I like the line for Willie Cat. I think that he's just going to put more out there. I think it's going to look better for the judges, and I do think that Willie Cat Daniel Santos wins this fight by decision. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, and I'll see you later in the week.